What is happening out there, Roto Scouts football fans? Welcome to the worst NFL game of the season. Primetime games have been kind of messy. We've had good teams play bad games. Maybe we'll get a couple mediocre team, or one mediocre team, one really bad team play a good game tonight, but Vegas sure doesn't think so. 30-point total on the board tonight. Fourth lowest since 1986. Not a lot of scoring expected. I was just doing some Googling around and looking at tweets and stuff about this game a little bit and about that ridiculous total. And the one that really caught my attention was that the top bet for the first touchdown is no touchdown. Across, is it DK? Okay, that one's from DK. There was another one from BetMGM, DK, and FanDuel. There are more bets on the total than on the spread, the majority of which are on the under, of course. But the top five most bet, this is per @BR betting on Twitter, and they're citing Ben Fawkes. So the top five DK bets for first touchdown tonight are no touchdown, Najee Harris, Steelers defense, Zeke, Patriots defense. Not a lot of passing offense expected by the public in this one. Gonna make for an interesting game. Gonna make for an interesting slate. Got some decisions. Got some weird little pieces of value. A $200 JaMychal Hasty as a total wild card on the Patriots side. Should be a fun one. What's going on, Cujo? Cujo's here. Always one of the first in. Wishing everybody good luck. Appreciate it, pal. Trey's here. Light crowd so far to be expected, I think, for this game. Not expecting a big turnout. I'm gonna be honest. I didn't do a ton of research about this game. I put together my usual notes. I did a little bit of, looking into things, trying to figure out that backup running back situation for New England. But really, this is a lousy game. Just gonna mash some numbers together and see where we land on this one. Mitch Trubisky. Bailey Zappi. Zappi not cracking a 10-point fantasy point projection. Usually quarterbacks come in with basically an auto 12, and you've got to be like pretty bad to get down to 10. The fact that he's under 10 is kind of astounding. Mitch Trubisky picking up like a point beyond like just the automatic 12 that I expect to see there. Was decent last week when he came into the game. Where did he go last week? Threw for like 100 and change and a touchdown. This is what we're dealing with this week. Kenny Pickett done. Surgery of some kind. Ramondre, if you're not up to speed, Ramondre for the Patriots is out. So Zeke, big week, big season-long pickup. Going to be the lead back this week. Basically, everybody in the terrible Patriots receiving core is hurt in some way, shape, or form. Both the top two wideouts, Devontae Parker, Juju Smith-Schuster, are banged up. Other guys, Demario Douglas and guys like that are out. So not only are they bad, but they're also hurt. It's just going to be really, really awful. Who is Belichick doubling or shading coverage? Pickens? I don't know. That's not my kind of question. Take your pick between the top two Pats receivers. You can make an argument either way. Deontay just happens to usually not get in the end zone. That's his one flaw, but he's a very, very talented receiver. So you can make the argument that he should draw a little bit more double coverage, but I really don't have a read on that. That's not the level that I get into typically with this stuff. It's a good question though, Trey. I mean, if you've got a read on it, let me know. Happy to consider it. Not going to mess with projections. Like I don't try and outguess that. Because you still got it comes down to talent, right? Even if they're double, like these guys have seen solid coverage before, and a lot of their numbers come against solid coverage. It's something that's kind of just in there. But if you got to lean, like I'm just interested in it, and like if as a tiebreaker between guys or what have you. They've also got Freiermuth on that in that passing attack. There's all of the talent is on the Pittsburgh side, right? Let's not make any mistake. Mitch Trubisky even is a better option than Bailey Zappi just in a total just head-to-head if you put them in a passing drill where they had to throw the ball between like tires going back and forth across the, like literally like on in Madden, I would take Mitch Trubisky. Like it's just that clear cut, I think. All the wide receivers are better. The tight end is better. The running backs are probably better, although Najee's banged up. Jalen Warren probably going to see more of the volume this week. They project out basically evenly. I updated the projections on this side for the running backs. I might take a little bit away from Najee, but every time we've thought that the carries were going to go one way or the other, they've maintained a pretty even split, or the other guy has taken it. So I don't really like to get in and mess with it. I think this is reasonable to have them here. They are going up against a very good rush defense, which is the interesting factor. The only good defensive side here is the Pats against the run. 3.2 yards per rush attempt allowed so far this season. That's first in football. 6.4 yards per pass attempt. They're mediocre against the pass. They've been decent in like the overall sense. On the other side, the Steelers 21st against the run, 4.3 yards per rush attempt, 6.4 yards per pass attempt is 19th, or 6.6 yards per pass attempt rather is 19th. Very similar numbers there. So I think there's plenty of support for playing both defenses in the same lineup. The kickers get crazy action in a game like this, so there is justification for going all over the board in this one. Trey says, the McAfee show mentioned Pickens. That's why I asked. They did a segment on Belichick talking about guys, and I think he went into TJ Watt and Pickens. Okay. I mean, especially if Belichick's the one that was talking about it, like they're quoting Belichick himself, then yeah, probably a little justification to think that Pickens has maybe a little bit harder of a time getting to his number. But again, the number accounts for when he's been in that type of situation as much as it accounts for when he's out there, running free against bad defenders. So. Mama says, sorry about the Simons call yesterday. He didn't get the chance in news until late that he would play full minutes. I already forgot what it was. Oh, was it? We were saying like 26 minutes. Yeah, that's where I had him. Look, that's where the guessing game comes in a lot, right? We're right more often than we're wrong, but sometimes we're just going to be wrong about those minutes, whether it's circumstantial or whether it's just, the coach had full faith and put him in. Power says Devontae Parker has the best matchup. Pickens and then Deontay have the next best matchups. Belichick is known for taking out the number one receiver. Problem is that Jonathan Jones on Pickens is hobbled. All right. It's more than we've talked about defense on one of these shows all season. Yeah, I just like to consider the defenses as DFS options, but I really, really don't dig into a lot of the individual defenders or anything like that. Not saying it's not valuable info, and that's good info that Power just dropped and that Trey brought up there, but just not something I dig too deep into or really care all that much about. It's all just taken care of by the numbers, by Vegas, and what these point totals look like. So, in terms of it being a showdown slate, I do think you're totally embracing options from both sides. And like I said at the top of the show, and sitting in the middle of the board there on the Patriots side, JaMychal Hasty is a complete wild card. I had him a little higher, I had him about a point higher, and I took a point away from him and basically gave it to Ty Montgomery to even things out a little bit. Ty Montgomery's been with the Patriots all season. JaMychal Hasty was signed off waivers. He had been with Jacksonville. He didn't carry the ball all season with Jacksonville. He played 3 games. Pats picked him up, I think, before last week's game. He was not active, if I'm remembering correctly, last week, and he's expected to be active this week. The reason I was giving him a couple of points is that I think there's a good chance that he's out there just running some routes and picks up a couple of targets. Like, I can really see it stacking as Zeke for, the predominant carries, targets, and everything. Ty Montgomery gets in there and carries the ball as a relief for Zeke a few times in the rush game. And he's also capable of getting out, running a route, being targeted. He's been targeted a few times in their passing game. We'll take a look at the numbers. But I think that they use JaMychal Hasty in that role. That's just kind of what Hasty's good at. So for 200 on DraftKings and 5,000 on FanDuel, that's really a potential, not crazy game changer, because I don't expect unless he gets that target in the red zone, in near the end zone, and manages to get it in for a score. I don't expect him to like completely break the slate with like 10 plus fantasy points. But for 200, you do not need that. That's just good value on DraftKings. So that'll come up in Sims and in crunches and everything if you leave it at this level. There is a chance that JaMychal Hasty doesn't really see the field or plays 5 snaps and doesn't touch the ball. There's a pretty fair chance that happens. But I think especially in a game like this, like that, and at a price point like that, when the alternative is at 26, that's a monumental difference when we don't know which one of these guys is necessarily getting the ball. So I do think there's some justification there, but I wanted to give Ty Montgomery his point back. I do think, since he's been with the team, since he's a guy who he had 1 carry last week when he after Amandre went out. He saw 3 snaps with the offense last week. Carried the ball once, gained 2 yards. Ran 2 routes, was not targeted. His biggest week of the season was a 10 route, 4 target, 1 catch, 5 yards week. In week 5, he also had a carry but gained no yards in that week. Arguably, his week 1 was better. In week 1, he ran 5 routes, was targeted 3 times. So fewer routes, fewer targets, but he caught 2 of them, gained 9 yards in that game, and he also rushed for 7 yards. I'm obviously being a little bit facetious. That week 5 game was also the 10 route game was also his snaps lead for the season. He saw 14 snaps with the offense that game. Every other game has been low single digits. Like low single digits. So it's tough to just say that, Ty Montgomery's going to be out there and pick up 10 carries tonight. So that'll be fun to watch. Keep an eye on that as we go toward lock. I might mess with the numbers a little bit back and forth. And the same thing on the Steelers side. You might see like a point swing away from Najee here. It might not necessarily go to Jaylen Warren because I don't want to stack him up too much. I might just put my thumb on the scale a little bit with Najee. But probably inconsequentially so, which means I probably shouldn't even do it. If you're going to the Patriots passing game, I think these guys are all just kind of a crapshoot. Tyquan Thornton could get interesting in the, with the idea that these 2 guys are banged up. So for a $3,400 price tag, $7,000 on FanDuel, that's not bad. He could easily outperform the projection. You do have reasonably capable tight ends with Hunter Henry, Mike Gesicki. Either one of those guys could catch the ball, get into the end zone. Pharaoh Brown probably just comes out of the player pool. Much more talent at the tight end position on the other side. Pat Freiermuth, a highly targeted and very good receiver of a tight end. $74.95, very reasonably priced. I expect Pat Freiermuth in the captain spot for 74 for whatever his the multiple there is 10 whatever. That's kind of interesting. I bet he's popular. I didn't memorize what the ownership looks like. I suspect he's going to be popular in that spot. And then you're just picking and choosing between Pickens, Deontay Johnson. As I said, I do still think that Deontay is probably the more talented of the 2, despite his propensity for not putting the ball in the end zone in a lot of games. Just a lot of talent there. He's the lower priced of the 2 on DraftKings. He's the higher priced of the 2 on FanDuel. But you can see it. You can see the kind of split in their pricing. They're very similarly priced, but the sites have them reversed. So that's really how close it is. The projections are showing it similarly. A little bit more separation on FanDuel based on just probably the PPR of it. But either way, solid 1-1A. If you want to get into the point that Trey was making about Pickens maybe drawing a little bit more double coverage and having a tougher day, then maybe you get to Deontay. But if that becomes the narrative around the industry, that might lead me to more Pickens. Between the 2, if you had to gun to your head tiebreaker it, just go with the lower owned. That's the easiest way to make these tiebreaker decisions in Showdown. And it's probably the most valuable way to do it too. You could also do it by price. Just go with the lower cost on whichever site you're playing on. Either one of those guys makes a very capable captain as well. I don't think it's warranted to just go overloaded with running back captains just in the expectation of a low scoring game, the expectation of a low end passing game. I think you do load up on some of these receivers, especially if people tend to get away from that a little bit more than they should. Let's see what some of this looks like. Yeah, so I think that's going to be just generally the approach that if I was just building like 20 lineups that I would take. And I think that's going to be how my lineups probably stack up as I build them and as they go through sims. I feel like it's probably just going to lean into some of these underowned people in the passing game and just hope that that's where the touchdowns come from. And spring, in with that will be plenty of shares of Zeke and plenty of shares of Jalen Warren and obviously the defenses. But I don't know that just saying like, low scoring total, like bad quarterback play, let's load up on the running backs in this one is necessarily the right approach. And it does look like, at least, according to the ownership source that I use, that is the way that the public is leaning in this one. So I kind of like getting the other direction. A lot of the wide receivers are pretty low owned. Patty Fryermuth is way too low owned, in my opinion, on DraftKings in that captain role. I'm sorry, but for 11-1, which is the 8th highest captain salary on DraftKings, Pat Fryermuth should be way more than low single digits owned. Maybe it's a bad projection. I don't know. But even if they're off by, 3x, that's still got him around like, 10%-ish. Pat Fryermuth is way too good of a tight end option. And in this game, way too good of a potential, I caught 10 passes and scored a touchdown and nobody else did anything kind of an option to be that low owned in the captain spot at that price. That's a really good option on DraftKings. Allen Robinson, Calvin Austin, Connor Hayward, Darnell Washington. We're talking about extremely limited volume down this end. Not a ton to work with down there. Looking just real quick at some of the specifics. Both teams giving up about 220 yards through the air, 6.6, 6.4 yards per pass attempt, 13 and 14 touchdowns. They're very similar defenses. The Steelers have racked up a bunch more sacks and a bunch more picks. That's where you pick up the advantage. Everything else kind of aligns between the two teams. But if you're picking a defense, I think you do go with the Steelers and throw them at the much worse offense, the much worse quarterback, the much worse team overall. And they're the more talented team getting some DFS counting stats for us. Monster numbers. In his 3 appearances, Mitch Trubisky's thrown for 91 yards a game. In his 5 appearances, Bailey Zappe's thrown for 59.8 yards a game. It's not a lot. Now, he must be Mitchell in this one. So, like I was saying, Trubisky came into the game last week. He played 29 snaps, went 11 of 17 for 117 yards and a touchdown. That absolutely works. Zappe in his last game, 13 of 25 for 141, no score. The game before that, played 33 snaps, essentially half the game, 9 of 14, 54 yards, an interception, no touchdown. The other ones we don't need to get into, but he has none of them had totals over 60 yards, but most of them is, 8 snaps here, 14 snaps there. But there's not a lot to work with here. In the receiving core, we've got Devontae. So they are giving up 1.17 touchdowns a game. The Steelers. On the other side, they're giving up a touchdown plus through the air. 8.5 yard defensive A dot versus an 8.3 yard defensive A dot. That's why, again, I kind of want to lean into the passing game if people are not looking that direction, because these two teams are not great against the pass. Even with non-NFL caliber quarterbacks in play, which I think is fair to say. I think there's upside to just showdown format, get to some differentiation with these receivers. Hunter Henry, 3 touchdowns on the season. Leads that Patriots receiving core right now. Devontae Parker picking up 4 targets a game, catching basically 2 of them. This yards per game is definitely wrong. Pharaoh Brown putting up 291 yards a game, huh? Wonder what's going on there. Ignore that. I must have... Did I kill a formula or something? Divided by AF8. I must have moved something and killed a formula here that's screwing up that yards per game. I assure you none of these guys are averaging these numbers. Or maybe they are. So just a touchdown on the board for one for Gesicki, one for Pharaoh Brown to support just the odd duck tight end plays. Jalen Reagor, not really seeing all that much in terms of action. Thornton is picking up 3 targets a game. So just looking at the specifics over the last 2 weeks, Parker played 51 and 52 snaps, ran 23 and 29 routes, was targeted 5 times in week 12, caught 3 of them for 42 yards against the inept Giants, and then came out, ran 29 routes, caught 4 of 9 for 64 yards against the terrible Chargers pass defense. Juju, similar route numbers, 44 and 57 snaps, 19 and 30 routes the last 2 weeks. Just 4 targets in week 12. Caught 2 of them for 10 yards. 3 targets in week 13. Caught 1 of them for 11 yards. Not a lot of production. Thornton played 50 snaps the last game in week 13. Ran 31 routes, was targeted once. That's kind of disappointing. He also carried the ball for 39 yards. He's carried the ball 2 weeks in a row. The week before, he carried the ball for 3 yards against the Giants. He also caught 2 passes in that game for 19 yards. Was targeted 5 times in that one. Back in week 9, he didn't play week 10. They had a bye in week 11. Back in week 9, he saw just 12 snaps, ran 9 routes, but he was targeted 4 times. So he's getting a couple looks when he's out there. And if we're considering that Juju and Devontae Parker are both hurt, one's dealing with an ankle, one's dealing with a knee. I forget which is which, but it doesn't matter. You could reasonably expect that Thornton would see a little bit of an uptick. Reagor, just 6 snaps with the offense last week, caught 1 of 1, 4 routes run. Was running a few routes back in weeks 6, 7, 8, and 9, but really has not drawn any targets. Doesn't have a game with more than a catch. Actually, he's got exactly 3 games in which he's caught a pass out of the, 6 that he's played. And in every game, he's caught exactly 1 pass for 11 yards. That's really hard to do. It's also not at all valuable for fantasy. But again, just with the idea that maybe he sees a little bit of an uptick in volume or potential volume based on the other guys being banged up. Zeke is the obvious go-to on the Patriots side, but he's also probably going to be the highest owned player on the entire slate. Carried the ball 17 times last week for 52 yards. Also caught 4 passes for 40. He was 4 of 5, 16 routes run. That's why I said, it is primarily going to be Zeke. That's why it gets really skinny around those 2 backups with Ty Montgomery and JaMychal Hasty. So even if you are going there, there is very low expectation because Zeke can play in the passing game. He might just be out there for 90, 100% of the snaps and just dominate everything in their backfield. I do think that both the other guys get involved a little bit, though. What's going on, gang? Let's see. We got Mr. Mike. What's up, Mr. Mike? Boswell projection. It's on there somewhere. Oh, you know what? All right, the kickers and the defense is sorted out for when I made the list before. Sorry about that. There he is. So both the kickers and the defense. Well, Boswell's getting a good projection. Not a great projection for Chad Ryland. I can stand to give him another point there, I think. Actually, wait a minute. Oh, I thought I had him. I thought he was at 6+, but he's not. Wow, a couple places have him even lower. It's just not a lot of scoring expectation in this game, so a lot of guys are just not getting fed any fantasy points here. But yeah, very low on Ryland, much higher on the Boswell side as usual. And we can sort these back by team so that those balance out. And then the Steelers defense, as we were talking about, one of the most highly projected individual plays on the entire slate. Not often we see a defense projection 10+. between the sacks and the interceptions they've racked up on the season and just the bad team, the bad quarterback they're going to be facing, there is expectation of some scoring defense there. Trey's saying, I don't understand why I can't get Labs to give me any pit defense captain. Even if I lock them in, they still won't give me. That's... I don't know why it wouldn't if you locked it. I haven't used Labs in for their optimizer or anything in years and years, though, so I don't really have a working knowledge of how they do things. I would have some guesses if it was on like DK, on RG or FC. What if you take every other option out at captain, Trey, and just run a crunch with only Pittsburgh captain available? Just curious if it would just die or if it would, like if it selects the other guys anyway, that's more problematic. I would expect that it just wouldn't run if it's not able to give it to you. But that might force it if it's the only thing available, if you're able to take things out of the pool. That would be the top of my head. That's the only thing I can really think of. Power says, I don't trust Belichick on if Zappe will be in the whole time or kicker Ryland won't get subbed out for Wright. I didn't realize, has he been messing with the kicker position? That escaped my attention. Kicker also not something I really monitor all that heavily. Yeah, that's kind of, I guess that's kind of interesting. Obviously Belichick's been messing with the quarterback position, but I think at this point, like, the writing's just kind of on the wall for everybody in New England. So everybody, like, he's made the commitment to just go to Bailey Zappi here and just ride it out. And then he won't be the coach in New England anymore, and it'll be somebody else's problem. So I feel less strongly about that. I mean, if he's thrown for 50 yards going into the fourth quarter, but they're still somehow in a 10-6 game, then yeah, maybe they make the change, but it's not like he's got a more effective option, really. You could go to Malik. What did Malik DNP last week? Saw 6 snaps with the offense back in week 6. Yeah, I mean, I could see it more as like he got in there for some gadgety kind of plays and just a dynamic playmaker kind of a guy that they stuck in there for a few plays rather than like he takes over. But if they're either getting smoked or it's just like a close game, but Zappi's been bad and just completely ineffective, then yeah, maybe they make the change. It's a wild card. I don't know that leads to any shares necessarily. Those can be if you did have like a inside info, right? Say you work for the Patriots and you knew for sure that second half is going to Malik, then that sort of thing, or to Mac Jones, that sort of thing could obviously bend a showdown slate for you. It's just that's not exactly what we're working with. We're kind of speculating. At that tight end spot, Mike Gesicki, 4 routes run last week, was not targeted. 7 routes the week before, 2 targets, didn't catch any of them. 2 catches for 22 yards back in week 10. Scored his touchdown back in week 7. Did have a run of like 1 to 2 to the 1 week with 3 catches back in week 6. Ooh, a 5-catch game in week 2. Excuse me. That's his season high. Has not been over the 36 yards that he put up in week 1. Has 1 touchdown, limited targets and volume. But in terms of like out there for a reasonable number of snaps, although actually the last 2 weeks has dipped 18 and 6. Has he gotten outsnapped by Farrow the last 2 weeks? Yeah, he has. 37 and 31 snaps for Farrow. So maybe it's more Farrow Brown that's the more interesting downstream tight end. Neither one of them gets many targets, runs many routes. Farrow's been out there 32, 37, and 31 snaps with the offense the last 3 weeks. He's run 3, 2, and 6 routes, and he's been untargeted in all 3 of those games. Hasn't seen a target since week 8. He caught 2 of 2 for 33 yards in that game. Week before that, he caught 2 of 2 for 51 yards. And then the actual starting tight end, Hunter Henry, doesn't really see all that much more than those guys. He sees a little bit more in terms of the targeting. He's got definitely more touchdown upside, but he's going to be the more popular play. That's why I like looking into those just odd duck second and third tight ends on depth charts, who gets targeted in the red zone. Between Farrow and Mike Gesicki, it is more frequently Mike Gesicki. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4 on the season. Last one came in week 10. He had 1, was targeted 3 times in that game, caught 2 for 22 yards. Didn't get in the end zone. But Farrow Brown hasn't been targeted in the red zone all season. So Farrow probably just more out there as a blocker. So I guess I will stick with the original read, that Mike Gesicki is the more appealing of those guys, and that's how it's projected here, obviously. So Farrow probably just forklifts out of the player pool. You got to hope that Gesicki gets one of those red zone looks and manages to come down with it, because that's really the only opportunity for him to put up any fantasy points at all. Henry will operate a little bit down the field with the offense. Like I said, he's the clear-cut starting tight end. 46 snaps each of the last 2 weeks, 49 the week before that. Running a season low of 13 back in week 7, a season high of 37, and primarily 20, call it mid-20s routes. Picking up 3 to 5 targets every week, catching 3 or 4 passes. Been in the end zone 3 times. Seen 4 red zone targets, so his red zone targeting is equivalent to what Mike Gesicki's seen in the red zone. But he's clearly the more targeted of their tight ends. On the Steelers side, we talked about Montgomery and Hasty at the top, but just, again, with no real idea where those touches are going to go, and the thought that Hasty could get out there and run a few routes and maybe catch a pass or two, for 200 on DraftKings, I do think there's a lot of relevance there, or potential relevance. He also might not get on the field, might not touch the ball. Ty Montgomery, I think there's a little bit more security of will play 5 to 10 snaps and might carry the ball twice. I don't know that he runs a route. I don't know that he gets targeted if that goes to Hasty, but he's capable of running routes and catching passes. So it doesn't automatically go to Hasty on third downs and passing situations. A lot more to work with, as discussed, on the Steelers side. The running back spot, Jalen Warren, Najee Harris is an interesting split. Najee coming into this game a little bit banged up. He was officially questionable, but all indications are he's going to play. He had 16 carries for 63 yards last week, caught 2 of 3 passes on 15 routes run, played 34 snaps with the offense. Jalen played 24 snaps with the offense, carried the ball 9 times for 59 yards, ran 8 routes, caught 1 of 3. Week before, 33 snaps, 25 snaps the week before that. So Najee's been out-snapping him, out-touching him. But I think Jalen picks the volume back up here. I've got him slightly ahead. And like I said, I might give Najee a little bit of a nudge down, but probably not. I'll think about it. But either way, it's a reasonable enough split because there's talent in both running backs. The issue becomes, and there are also red zone opportunities galore for Jalen Warren. Both these guys get a lot of touches in the red zone because this team's not great at throwing the ball into the end zone. So the last 4 weeks, starting in week 10, Warren had 2 red zone carries, 1 the next week, 3 after that, and then 1. At the same time, the same 4 games, Najee went 2, then 0, 3, and 5. He scored touchdowns in 2 of those games, the week 10 and the week 12 game. But they've got basically equivalent touchdown upside. And I think Jalen probably at least draws even snaps-wise. Maybe out-touches him this week. Godwin just picking up a point. Hasn't played a snap with the offense in weeks and weeks. Just out there on special teams. And I said a point, but I mean a fraction of a point. No real need to play him. He just comes out of the player pool. On the wide receiver side for Pittsburgh, we talked about Deontay and Pickens. Put numbers on them real quick. Pickens caught 4 or 5 for 86 yards last week. Deontay, 4 of 5 for 33 yards, scored a touchdown, his second of the year, second in the last 2 years. In week 12, caught 4 of 8 for 50 yards. In week 12, Pickens caught 3 of 5 for 58 yards. There's like a couple additional targets going Deontay's way. Most weeks, like the game plan seems to be that. But it's very, very close. Like I said, 1-1A or a solid 1 with a very good 2, however you want to call it. Pickens has 3 100-yard games on the season. He's also got 3 touchdowns. Deontay, and did all of those come with Deontay out? Like 7. In Deontay's first week back, he had one of his 100-yard game. The other 2 came before Deontay came back. Deontay hasn't put up 100 yards in any game yet this season, but he's been solidly 79, 85, 90, 2 games in the teens, and a 50-yarder, and then the 33-yarder with a touchdown. So a little bit up and down, but has had highly capable games. And then Patty Freiermuth, the big game in week 12, 9 catches, 120 yards on 11 targets. Dropped back down to 5 targets last week, but caught 3 of them, 29 yards. Was targeted twice in the red zone, but didn't get into the end zone. Picks up red zone targets, had 3 in week 1, had 1 in week 3. Missed a chunk of time there. Scored touchdowns in both week 1 and week 3. Going to be a prime target for this team. So, again, just given where he's priced and how he's owned on the DK slate in what's expected to be a low-scoring game, you can't tell me there's not upside for Pat Freiermuth to go out there and score both the touchdowns in this entire game and just dominate the captain spot. So, I really like that option. Allen Robinson, not so much. Did play 31 snaps last week. Got back up to 3 targets. Had seen just 1 target the week before on 22 routes run after getting 4 in week 11. And had a run before week 11 of 1, 1, 2, and 0 targets. So the 4 and the 3, 2 out of the last 3 weeks is reasonable. In week 11, he caught 3 of 4 for 20 yards. In week 13, he caught 3 of 3 for 19 yards. He has not been in the end zone yet this season. He has not been over the 64 yards that he put up back in week 1, which I'm getting sick of saying, so I hope he gets over 64 yards tonight. I don't expect it, though. But there are a couple of targets for Allen Robinson. Calvin Austin, just 1 target in each of the last 2 games. No targets in week 11, and then 2 1-target games in weeks 9 and 10. A 2-target game back in week 8. Was drawing more action before Deontay got back. The first 4 weeks of the season, he had 4, 5, 6 targets. But it's dried up at this point. As a showdown dart throw, maybe. You hope that you get it right on the Calvin Austin single target. And of course his ADOT isn't coming up because he's the 3rd. Annoying. An 11.7 yard ADOT. So there is a little bit of downfield home run threat type opportunity there. But it's really going to amount to like 1 target. If that. Hayward, 2 targets each of the last 2 games. Didn't catch either of them last week. Caught 2 of them for 11 in week 12. Was seeing a little bit more action with Freiermuth out. Darnell Washington, 7 routes run, 0 targets last week. Had 1 target each of the 4 games before that. Plays a reasonable number of snaps. 30 plus snaps in 3 out of the last 4 weeks. 7 routes, 10 routes, 2 straight weeks, and then 7 routes again last week. If I'm throwing a dart at the down depth chart tight end spot on the Steelers side, it's really close. Neither one of these guys is an overly frequent target, but like I said, Hayward did pick up 2 in the last 2 games. He's also been targeted 3 times in the red zone on the season, where Washington hasn't been targeted in the red zone and has seen fewer targets, but a little bit more consistency of snaps. I probably slightly lean Hayward in terms of a fraction of a point of touchdown potential. But there's very, very little there. You can absolutely take both those guys out of your player pool if you want. That said, they both are... Actually, no. Darnell slips below, but I might nudge Darnell back up to a point so that I can just leave him in my pool on FanDuel. But a very non-critical play. They're both $200 options on DraftKings, which does keep them on the board with a little bit of potential. but it's extremely, extremely thin. And then, is Miles Boykin even in here? Boykin's run 2 routes each of the last 2 weeks. He hasn't been targeted. He hasn't been targeted since week 9. Probably not worth playing. Has seen, a handful of snaps each of the last few weeks, but not really much there. Let's jump over to the lineup builder. Oh, so Trey, going back to Trey's problem. So the crunch dies when you take out the captains. It sucks. Can't download the CSV and use it because they're highly dropped it right there. Bullshit, simple booty juice. That doesn't sound great. I haven't used it, so I don't want to weigh in one way or the other. I do use them still as a news source a lot of the time. I use them for lineups for baseball. Their lineups page is great. Just copy and paste into my model. But that said, I haven't used them for a lot of stuff for similar kinds of reasons from way back. So I'm not totally shocked. Let's get Patty Fryermuth into the captain spot here and see what we can do. Load me up some Mitch with him. I think that makes sense. I mean, you start with Fryermuth in the captain spot, Mitch Trubisky, Steelers defense, and now you got 7,700 left with multiple viable $200 guys on the board. This is just silly. I was thinking of giving the Pats just the kicker, but let's just, for argument's sake, let's see what happens if we go with a Zeke lineup, just because we do have the money to spend, and this is the way that the public would make that decision. So I just want to see how, even with a low-owned Pat Fryermuth captain, how high up we get here. It's probably reasonable to go with one of the running backs. Let's go with Jalen. And that leaves us 57. So we can get Boswell into that lineup. Yeah, it's duped 1,000 times. That can't be right. That's exceedingly popular. Why is that? All right, maybe it's this. What happened here? Oh, that's not right. That's weird. He's not that low owned. Oh, that's the FanDuel side. Oh, did I swap these? I did. All right. That makes sense. Hang on one sec. This is DK. And I put it in the FanDuel side and vice versa. I know that lineup's going to be popular, but there was no way it was going to be duped 1,000 times. Yahoo, unfortunately, we're not covering anymore. All right, that should take care of that problem. 591 times, Jesus. Why is this not showing a value? What's going on here? That's why, because you still got it as MVP. All these little things. Could use a formula to concatenate a captain in there. All these little things. There we go. Dupe 0 times. That's also incorrect. If this is dupe 0 times, everybody within the sound of my voice should go play this lineup. Trey says I just ran a sim through Ace Mox. Interesting. I haven't simmed anything yet. What are you sorted by, Trey? Are you sorted by win rate or are you sorted by ROI? I'm just surprised. I mean, they are very likely to be high-scoring captain plays. I'm just surprised because I expect them to be pretty popular that they would be that frequently in the top spots. All right, so I got to figure this out. Let's look at a different version of this, but let's leave this. We're going to leave this over here. I gotta see if that dupe is still wrong. There's no way it should be 0. Let me see if I can build like a crazy popular one. That one's duped 21 times, so it does now appear to be working. That's wild. If this lineup is fucking free money. What's the point differential between those two? 62.38, 65.48, negligible. Wow. I very much like this lineup to the point where I might go put it in on DraftKings. There's no way that comes. I mean, especially now, but there's no way that this comes up unduped. It maths out that way, I guess. But I cannot imagine that people don't get to that lineup. In which one? In the other one? True story. Either way, I was just trying to make sure that the dupes was working, so like it doesn't actually really matter. Right? I just wanted to make sure they weren't all going to show 0. But I am shocked with how low on that one's coming up. Hang on. That, like I said, that cannot be right. Let me re-upload this ownership. We're going to go to this extent because I can't imagine. Something must have been incorrect in that initial ownership run. Whoops, it's the wrong file. Oh, Joker, go lie down, buddy. We're almost done. DraftKings. That's a shorter file. Apologies to our pals at RotoGrinders for showing their ownership here. Yeah, so those were not the right ownership numbers. These have changed dramatically. All right, that's going to fix the problem. That makes a whole hell of a lot more sense. Oh, but wait, hold on. I got to fix the Steelers. The defenses. 103 times. All right. Now we're on track. That makes a hell of a lot more sense. So, like, Freiermuth was way too low owned in that initial set of projections. Mitch was probably, I think he went from 30 to like 50 in that update. So that makes a lot more sense. All right. So let's get back to what can we do to get to a unique-ish Freiermuth lineup that we do like. That's not quite those. And then we'll take a look at some Warren and some Najee's, and then we'll take a look at FanDuel, and then we'll get out of here. So I do want Mitch in these. Like I said, I think leaning into the passing game makes some sense. So let's grab Zappy. I don't love Parker and Juju. I kind of like Taekwon here. And then we'll go with Deontay. And that leaves us 75. Let's play whatever you want week, by the way. On DraftKings, anyway. Steelers defense is going to be way too popular to do this with, but let's see. Only 11 times. That's playable. That's not bad. Taekwon's definitely a differentiator in there. Freiermuth at the captain spot is, again, too low owned. This has legs. I don't completely hate it. If you were to take one of the running backs, can I afford 75? Can't afford either of them, okay? You could go Boswell. Leave a little bit more money on the table than the defense does. That gets you down to 8. That's not bad either. If you wanted to go like 2 pieces of the Patriots passing game, that's probably going to help you get unique. I think I probably just go Hunter Henry rather than going with duplicating the wide receivers. That gets you to 4, which isn't bad. And you could probably even upgrade, like, that leaves you $100. That pops you back up to 17, though, if you put Parker in there over Tyquan. If you put Juju in there over Tyquan, that's not bad. You stay at 8. If you don't have the faith in Tyquan Thornton, and you do, for some reason, have faith in Juju Smith-Schuster. The fact that didn't pop back over 10 is pretty reasonable with the Juju lineup there. Let's take a look at what Jalen looks like in the captain spot. Let's go like Jalen, Zeke. Look at Groundy here. That's popular. We got to get really different with this last choice. This isn't going to get it down enough. It down to 18. That's not awful. I could have cheated it and gone, Tyquan will probably take it down below 10. Yeah. It's not really cheating because I do have an expectation that Tyquan's going to see a few targets, has some upside to get in the end zone. That's not bad. Like chalky game script kind of expectation. The two, or one of the 2 running backs on the Steelers side, 2 of the 3 potential lead running backs in this game. Steelers defense, their kicker, their tight end without the quarterbacks, and then just sticking somebody low owned in that last spot. Not awful. I want to see what we can do up here. If I just do 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you get $8,800 to work with there. So I just wanted to take like several of the more expensive guys. Actually, let me put Pickens into that. That actually makes even more sense as a potential starting point because you get both wide receivers, taking the most expensive possible plays, and then you just stick Hasty in there and you hope that he gets 2 targets and one of them comes near the end zone and dive for the pylon and get the ball in or whatever. It's going to happen exactly like that. Mark my words. So for $6,800, I could put a ton of different options into this lineup now. For $66, you got the Steelers D right there, which is an interesting way to go. 28 times duped, even with Hasty in there. It's kind of interesting. If you go Boz, it gets you down to 19. Anybody from the Patriots probably helps here. Hunter Henry takes you to 11. Juju will take you below. Yeah, 6. Tyquan will probably take you down to like 3 or 4. Yeah. With 3,400 in this lineup left on the board, you could presumably go like something like that if you wanted. That's a 2. So technically that's lower owned. So it is kind of worth noting. What's the... Nobody look. Yeah, 5% are there. Tyquan only 3%. Allen Robinson 2.6. So that isn't worth noting. Did you guys catch what I just did there? Right, we were looking at these total lowball JaMychal Hasty lineups, and they're getting a couple of dupes. But the fact that we're leaving 3,400 on the table when we're using JaMychal Hasty to get different here kind of brings the play back around to like you should probably just use one of these guys who are lower owned. Right? This is technically a lower owned combination than going to the much less likely to score anything Hasty. Allen Robinson has some security of like 2 or 3 targets. Thornton probably going to pick up a couple. JaMychal Hasty is much more of a wild card than these 2 guys are. And if you can get to a lower owned combination and a higher projection or similar projection, it kind of makes sense to maybe get not away from the $200 Hasty, but with everybody so cheap on this slate, and the ability to just play whatever you want anyway by using Allen Robinson and Mike Gesicki and guys like that, the $200 Hasty is actually a lot less relevant than it would be on like for a normal football game. That's kind of interesting. Hasty, you could argue that Hasty is getting, even at 5%, might actually be getting more attention than he should warrant at that $200 price, which is kind of slate changing in a way. That's an interesting thing to stumble across. I'm glad we did this. So, yeah, if there's a kicker situation in New England, please inform me because I don't know about it. I'll Google real quick. Former Patriots kicker Robbie Gould announces his retirement. That's not what we're looking for. Patriots missed field goal. Why some New England fans were celebrating kicker Chad Ryland's brutal miss. I don't see anything about a situation. What do they have? What do they even have on the depth chart? Let me see. Is anybody playing the basketball slate, by the way? I did not end up getting lineups into the... there's not even kickers on this depth chart. I did not end up getting lineups into the basketball slate. I kind of just put off building my placeholder all afternoon for the crappy 2-game, 5 p.m. start time. And FanDuel just didn't really have any kind of appealing tournaments at all. So I didn't get in it. It's weird. I got the itch till I pick up my phone and look at my lineups, and they're not there. New England... So from the, extremely unofficial depth chart that I'm looking at on ESPN.com, Chad Ryland's the only place kicker on this depth chart, and the punter is their holder. So I don't think they can just switch over to the punter. So I'm really not sure what are we worried about. Labs had another kicker in the pool as well, and Power said he could get pulled. Yeah, that's the that was what initially brought it to my attention, was when Power said that something might happen with the kicker. But is there another kicker actually on the depth chart? Is there another kicker in the salary pool? Maybe I can figure it out that way. Not on Yahoo, obviously. Boswell, Ryland... BT Potter, is that who we're talking about? Nope, he's on Pittsburgh. So let's see if DK has it. Boswell, Matthew Wright, is that the guy? All right, he appears to be on New England. Matthew Wright, American football. Yes, that's the correct guy. Signed with the practice squad. I don't see anything about Matthew Wright being activated from the practice squad, though. I guess keep an eye on that. If that happens in the next hour, then maybe you get that curveball. Yeah, Matthew Wright. Thanks, guys. Projected for 0, but in the pool was just odd. Yeah, look, I mean, if he's not with the team, if he's not promoted from the practice squad, then we don't have to sweat it. If they promote him from the practice squad before the game, then maybe you get funky with Bill Belichick doing stuff. But right now, I don't think we're going to sweat it. I'll keep an eye on it. It's just try to make it something of nothing. Once again. Now, good stuff. Worth looking into. I mean, curveballs like that, especially on Showdown, If you can, for one, avoid a pitfall because of that, but for two, if there's an opportunity to grab something that absolutely that the public isn't like aware of, that is a huge potential advantage. So it's always, if there's some kind of question like that, it's always worth looking at, especially at a like not guaranteed points, but a somewhat secure points position in a low scoring game like kicker. Tiz has a few random NBA lines in. Not a lot going on in the NBA streets today. What's the score in that game, though? That, what are we at? Why are you showing me yesterday's scores, you bastards? 63-51 Pacers at the half. Woo! That game went off with, or had anyway, earlier in the day, a 256-point total. Bonkers scoring potential in that game. So, all right, let's get back to finishing off these lineups. 6:30. We're going for an hour for this awful, worst game of the season football game. Do we want to see anything else? What happens if we go like, again, lean into the ground game, but let's get both Steelers running backs in there this time. And we'll go like, right, that is like the most straightforward possible. I think this is going to be a low-scoring ground game and defense kind of an approach to building this. I just want to see where we could potentially take it. Sometimes I like doing like, you know, the most obvious thing and then seeing, all right, do I tweak it? So if you go that route, leaves $100 on the table, 78 potential dupes. So what can we do with this one to get it different? We can probably move Frymuth to the captain spot. Obviously, will lower us. No, it won't. Interesting. So, all right, Frymuth went up in ownership then between these things. I'm glad I grabbed that update earlier. Frymuth obviously went up in ownership. What do they actually have him at now? Oh, you know what that's actually an effect of? It's not Frymuth. Frymuth is still significantly. He was at the same number as he was earlier. It just wasn't in the Excel file there. It's actually a product of Zeke and his popularity at the flex position. He's just massively, massively popular at flex. So actually moving him to flex here and Frymuth up to captain, despite Frymuth being the lower owned captain, this pushes the dupes back up. So that's interesting. So the goal then would be probably just forklift Zeke out of the entire thing, which kind of defeats the purpose of the exercise. Unless you wanted to go like maybe Boz captain is significantly lower, but I'm not sure. 91. That's not even. Jeez. Yeah, it's difficult to get this one down to anything reasonable with this exact combo. Because these guys are both going to be popular. The Steelers got to be just basically as popular as Boswell and in the captain spot there. I have Boswell in there. 83. So there's really no way to differentiate this group just by moving things around. So you got to get somebody different in there. If you just went, can't go to Pickens. Not over Frymuth anyway. You can get Deontay in, so let's do that. That drops you to 58. I mean, that's way too many, but we're at least on our way just by changing Najee out for Deontay in that, spending basically the same money, but you're obviously taking the lineup in a different direction. But that's not unique enough, so you got to leave some money on the table with it, and you got to get really less comfy. Maybe like a Hunter Henry gets us different enough. What if we just direct swap Henry? So that's a big dip. All right, you're cutting your dupes in half. Still way too many at 44, but by swapping, tight end from one team to the other, you are cutting your dupes pretty significantly there. You're cutting 2.5 points of projection out. Still not my favorite swap. That's kind of interesting. If you pop Taekwon in there where I had Boswell, you go from 83 down to 15. This still has the Steelers D in the captain spot, so let's flip this back to the original configuration. Now it's down to 14 because we're not using Zeke in that flex spot anymore, which is really interesting because he is the highest owned captain. But the idea that we're getting fewer dupes when he's in the flex role than in the captain role is kind of compelling for Zeke. So 14 here, that's not bad. If you go like Juju, again, pick up a little bit. You pop back up to 26. I would play the 14 one. I don't think I play this 26 one. But again, I kind of want to lean into some of the pass catchers. Let's do one more. One more. Have we done a Pickens up top yet? He is 10,000. He's the most expensive guy on the slate. Pickens, Mitch. This game is just missing a Ramondre. Like, he should just be here to grab some of this salary and some, security of points. It's like that first click from the Patriots side is so difficult. Let's give it a Bailey Zappi. Let's get him and a pass catcher in there. Let's go to Hunter Henry again. 58. Let's get the controversial Chad Ryland in. 7. You can still play the Steelers defense against this. There's no issue there. Only 10 dupes there. With a Pickens captain, Trubisky, Bailey Zappi, and one of his reasonable targets. Their kicker. That's not awful. I can't get to Boswell in that configuration unless I just swap them in. You can play both kickers. That drops you to 7. This is a reasonable enough lineup. If you want to call Devontae the best potential pass catcher on this side, you pop him in for Hunter Henry. It takes you back up to 8, but I mean, that's still highly playable. There are some options, even when you're using the top end players. If you want to swap in Deontay, you pop to 11. He's a little bit more popular in the captain role, but again, super playable. Some ways to go. Let's take a quick look at some FanDuel lineup. 638. What is this, an 8:15 start? Yeah. FanDuel. I want Deontay in the captain spot, or the MVP spot. I want Mitch. I want the Steelers D. I want... I have 11-7 to spend. Maybe Jalen and then something difficult. Nope, not difficult. 10,000 left to spend. Well, this will be a super popular way to take this one. 107 dupes. All right, so let's start from here and see what we can carve up. 500 left. If you just go from Jalen to Najee, you cut a few. I still prefer Jalen, so I'm going to leave him in there. Let's dip from... you know what? Let's get both of them out of that, actually. If we go this direction. 56. 31. 47. Blech. Steelers are probably really popular there. All right, 13. See what it does with Patty there. Yeah, 43. You got to get really cute sometimes on FanDuel. Like if you did like something like this. There you go. That gets you to 8. It also lowers your credibility of upside. You cut 5 FanDuel points projection. But it's Showdown, right? This is the kind of option that you have to embrace. If you wanted to embrace the Jermichael Hasty for 5K, that's a 20. Again, it's another spot where he's going to be more popular based on being that low cost, where you don't necessarily need that low salary. So I kind of think that some of these other options around him in that price tier that have a little bit more realistic regular snaps, actual expectation of a couple of targets, have touched a football in an NFL game this season, which JaMychal Hasty, again, has not done. JaMychal Hasty, the last time he touched a football in an NFL game was the last week of last year with a different team. The snaps that he's seen this year came with a different team that did not let him touch the football in those 3 games. So considering that he pushes that popularity back up on both sites, and it's even more critical on the DraftKings slate, again, where he's 200 versus he is 5,000. He is the min, and he's the most realistic, I think, of the mins on FanDuel. But if he's picking up a little bit of attention, like with no security whatsoever that he's even going to touch the ball, I can kind of get away from that a little. I'll have some, but I might reduce it so that I don't have that much. It's just an interesting differentiation point. You got Taekwon. All right, now we're talking. See if we can get that a little bit more realistic. 22, that's no good. What about Taekwon and Hunter Henry? 15, that's not bad. Deontay, Mitch, Hunter Henry, Bailey Zappi, and Taekwon Thornton. Leave $6,000 on the table. Still duped 15 times. But 15 times will win you 15, 20 grand if you hit the top. So it's not awful. Let's go a different direction here, obviously. Let's go with the Zeke up top. He'll be super popular in that role. Let's lean into some running. Let's go with that same rushers and defense and kicking. It's just harder to do because there's fewer spots. So let's call it that as the obvious base. And then that leaves you 16,000, so you can literally play anybody on the slate, which is annoying. So, like, say you just went to the, I have 16, I can spend 15. You're duped 215 times. So that's not a good lineup. If you went to the absolute bottom and said, I'll take JaMychal Hasty for 5,000 because nobody would do that, that'll be duped 42 times. Now, will it actually be duped 42 times, or is it just the way that the math goes? There is a cut to this, right? It won't actually be duped 42 times because many, many people will not just leave 11,000 on the table. They'll set their optimizers to not be allowed to leave 11,000 on the table. So the actuals are probably lower than this, but this would be duped. So it's just a very common build through those 4 players. But that was just to illustrate like how difficult it is to differentiate this at all. Like even if you went Allen Robinson there, which is a more realistic option, leaves 85, you're duped 18 times. Let's go with a actual attempt to build a Zeke lineup that's differentiated. I just don't want to, I mean, the obvious guys are like, some of these to just stick in there and then you're just, kind of cheating the number, but these are the guys that land in those high ROI lineups when you sim it out. Those are the plays that you need. But let's see what we can do with like a Juju, Boswell, 146, and I got to leave some money on the table. Go back to A-Rob again. See, that's just like cheating it. Leaving 10-5 on the table gets you down to 7. It is a reasonable enough lineup. It is definitely a lineup that I would consider playing. If that came through the Sims, even low projected, there's no issue with playing that in a showdown slate. If you wanted to go like back to the defense, 48 times is way too popular. Both defenses is 44 times, and these are all leaving a big chunk of salary on the table. It's just everybody's just too cheap for the way that this game comes together. So with Zeke in the MVP spot on FanDuel, that is tough to get down. Actually, let me just do it that way. Let me just reverse those guys real quick. That cuts you a little bit, 44 to 41, but not noticeable enough. If you went with Najee in that spot instead, that cuts you down to 29. Maybe that's the approach. If you go Najee and Warren, gets you to 26. Now we're at a very weird lineup, though. Najee, Jalen Warren, Juju, and both defenses. And it's still duped that many times. That is an oddball. I forget. I don't know which one that was, but Trey said we hit on one of his lines. Pit D with a lot of dupes. You got it, buddy. Tiz, yeah. Winning lineup's going to be like 35 points and leaving like 30K on the table. I do think even with money left on the table, it's not an automatic path to no dupes tonight. Beantown says, if we're working with a narrative that Belichick tries to take Pickens out of the game, is Robinson a decent play with his relationship with Mitch? It's probably a stretch, but a thought. I think Robinson's a decent play, full stop. Right? I for showdown slates exclusively. This isn't a guy I would be advocating going to even in like extremely large field tournaments because there's very limited upside. But for a showdown slate, 3 targets, and he's gotten 3 targets or more most weeks. He's got 1, 2, 3 weeks with 1 target and 1 week with 0 targets. But every other week he's had 2 or more. The majority of weeks it's like 3. He catches a lot of what's thrown his direction. You're probably talking about 3 catches and 20 yards at most. But there is the upside that Allen Robinson, and also, if you want to chase the narrative thread there of, Belichick takes away the best weapon. We've been saying that for years and years. But if there is a lot of chatter about that being Pickens and they're telling us that they're going to zero in on him, then there's reasonable expectation that maybe Allen Robinson spikes to 5 targets or whatever. So sure, I think he's perfectly viable. I think it's a lot less the case for Calvin Austin. Seems like way more of a dart throw there. He's seen just like 1 target since basically Deontay came back. It's just 1 target a week, but there is still a little bit to cling to there. And then you get even further downstream if you wanted to start talking about the Hayward and Washington options, which I already spent too much time on earlier in the show, and the Boykinses of Josh, both defenses going to be very highly owned in this one. Again, just to reiterate what I started the show with, all of the money in this game is on the under and is on nobody scoring a touchdown for the first touchdown scorer bet, or the 2 running backs, and then the defenses are the next or among the top 5 in where the public money is. So what does that tell us is, 1, to that point, the defenses are going to be crazy highly popular, as are the running backs. The public is expecting a low scoring game. So exactly what I was saying before, that just makes me want to zig. When they zag, I want to zig into the passing game. And if I can grab any kind of advantage in a showdown slate by going to some of these weak receivers that I don't like having to play with their weak-ass quarterbacks that I don't like having to play, you just hold your nose and do it because the math is going to support it. If that's not how it comes through Sims, if you run Sims and it comes up different, then, play obviously what the math tells you. But my inclination, just based on where all the public money is, where the ownership is, and all of that, is to definitely get to some of these pass catchers. It's tough because Herbert wasn't good versus New England last week, which makes it hard to see Trubisky at all. Yeah, I mean, their defense is not bad against the pass. They're not good against the pass, I wouldn't say, but they're not bad, and they've had their moments, and they are very good against the run. Trey says, with everyone on Warren, I kind of like Najee if he's good to go. Again, I do kind of just expect it to be an even split. I'm just a little bit concerned about the overall health. But if he's out there, you got to basically expect that he's at full capacity. It just might be the additional 3-4 touches that he had as an advantage over Warren go the other way. My mom's text messaging me about plans for the weekend. Oh, yeah, by the way, I'll mention it now because we're about to punch out in a couple minutes. Schedule for the next couple of days, including the weekend, the football show, completely up in the air. I got to see if I can figure something out. Saturday is my niece's big show for the Nutcracker. So I'll be at that Saturday evening. So that's going to chew up our football show in our regularly scheduled spot. I'll be here. I'm pretty sure I'll be here for a basketball show tomorrow. We're definitely going to have content on the website. 100%. Everything you normally have will be up on the website. Just might not be a football show. Maybe not a basketball show tomorrow, but I'm probably going to be here for that. If I do that, maybe I figure something out for football and cram it into tomorrow evening. But stay tuned. That's why you hit the subscribe button, because our shows are all over the place time-wise. So that'll let you know when we schedule something. Follow the @RotoScouts Twitter handle, because I always tweet it out on there as well, and I always send links to all the content. And jump in the Discord. Hit the like button here. You guys all rock. I think we covered enough ground, right? Nobody wants to... Do we need to build any more FanDuel lineups? We built a few. Had a decent look at it. It's just tough to get unique. Not that that's why I'm ending the show. I'm ending the show because we've been going for an hour and 20 minutes on this awful, awful football game, and I've just got nothing left to say about it. And I got to get lineups built. But, yeah, I think I'm going to punch out there with that in mind. You guys rock. Really appreciate all you guys coming and hanging out and everything. No show without you guys doing that. So you guys continue to be awesome. Good luck out there tonight. Somebody go win something, and we'll see you tomorrow. Later.